Good morning, everyone. This is the Geospatial Professional Network's kickoff of our 2026 Excellence in Geospatial webinar series. Welcome, everyone, and Happy New Year. I am Rachel Frojen. I'm a proud GPN member volunteer, and I'm a member of the ESIG Exemplary Systems in Geospatial Awards Committee. Today is the first of 4 free webinars celebrating last year's ESIG award winners, and we are going to get started. Following the presentation, I'll explain a tiny bit more about the ESIG awards, but no reason to delay. As for today's presentation, if you would please gather your questions and answers to the Q&A section. We're going to save those until the end. And we will get started without further delay. Today's presenters are from the City of Columbus, Ohio, Department of Public Service, and they are talking about their close 2025 ESIG award-winning enterprise system. We have 3 presenters today, Drew, Kim, and Russ, and let me just give a very quick introduction and welcome to them. Drew is the Assistant Director of Asset and Performance Management in the Department of Public Service for the City of Columbus, Ohio. Drew has worked with asset management systems for over 25 years and transportation systems, and has worked previously for the Ohio Department of Transportation. Kim Baillieul is a data solutions manager for the City of Columbus Department of Public Service and has designed and managed geospatial projects across many disciplines for over 2 decades. Supporting currently the Vision Zero Columbus, data governance planning, and many cross-departmental projects. A very important and fun fact is that, is that Kim has a master's degree in geography from Ohio University and has authored a children's book called Mommy Beeps. She loves being outdoors and building Legos with her sons. And then the third presenter will be Russ Bowerman. Russ is the close program coordinator for the Department of Public Service for the City of Columbus, Ohio, working in the field of civil engineering support as an engineering technician and construction inspector. Your team will inspire us today. So as we're all listening to your presentation, all of you GPN and geo nerds out in the world, please be thinking about how your organization can be inspired by this group for submitting a 2026 ESIG Exemplary Systems and Geospatial packet, and we'll tell you more about that at the close of this presentation. So go ahead, Drew. Thank you all.
Thank you. I'm going to share the slides here, so I'm going to make sure that everyone can see. All right. Can everyone see my screen with the slides?
Can.
Great. All right. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Rachel, for the introductions. We at Columbus really appreciate the opportunity from GPN to talk about our CLOSE program. So we'll start with CLOSE as an acronym. It stands for Closed Lanes or Steel Plate Events. We were really honored to win the Exemplary ESIG this year. It's been a long time coming for this program to become up and running, and so that was just such an incredible honor to get that award. So to go over kind of what we're going to discuss today, I wanted to go over an introduction to the city and our department, the need for CLOSE and why we designed it and built it, the research and development process, what we included, the legislating of CLOSE, which is what's given it kind of bulk and teeth, the operational impacts it's had, and the partnerships. We've built a lot of partnerships through this program, as well as some of our upcoming plans and goals, and then we'll take questions at the end. Drew, go ahead.
So with that, just give you a little introduction to the City of Columbus. We have a population that's approaching a million, about 933,000 folks, greater than a million in the metro area of Columbus, 15th largest city in the country. We are the second fastest growing city, but we are the fastest growing city in the Midwest. We're also nearly a half of the United States population lives within a day's drive to Columbus. So there's a fairly good significance in terms of Columbus and where we're at. Next one, Kim. Next slide, Kim. And then next, just kind of give you a flavor for who we are, the Department of Public Service. We have about 800 people that work within the Department of Public Service. As you can see, the different divisions that we have across our department. We also have our director's office and also our support staff in terms of HR, finance, and so on and so forth. But these are the more critical departments that service the city from a Department of Public Service standpoint. All of these fall under an umbrella we call infrastructure asset management. And that's where we're managing the physical inventories of assets that total somewhere close to $14 billion. And our tagline for this is measure to manage to make it better. Next slide. So how did we get here? It came from a phone call from our then director, Director Gallagher, Jennifer Gallagher. She called me, and it had to be about 5:30. Wasn't quite 6 o'clock in the morning, but about 5:30 in the morning. And she was hearing about all of these closures due to some flooding and some other things going on around the city. And she wanted to know, why didn't we know about all these closures? And when I got into the office, she told me to meet her first thing in the morning. And I got into the office and she said, I feel like we're a little blind here. We need to know when people are shutting down our lanes. And what we found in the past was that things would get shut down. Sometimes the barricades wouldn't get removed. Sometimes things were getting shut down because we had some very egregious contractors that were doing things they weren't supposed to be doing, and so on and so forth. And so she basically said, need you to figure out a way to capture these lane closures. So again, going back to our tagline, we measure first. We're a data-driven department, but we measure first. And that's how we actually came into developing the close application. Kim?
Thanks, Drew. Yeah, so imagine your boss coming to you saying, hey, the director wants a map of all the closures in the area. Where do you even begin with that, right? Think about the data that's available out there. There's here data, there's, some of the Google services, but that type of closure information doesn't tell us the who or how long or provide the context that public service really needed. So started with gathering requirements and start with where we are. Basic ITIL practice. If you've not heard of ITIL, I encourage you to check it out. It's a great ancillary piece to GIS education that I think really could help folks just with process improvement and planning. So started with where we are and talking with each of the divisions within our department. Where are you getting this information now? When you go to make a visualization, you need data to do so. And so I started looking at where are people finding out? And the problem was people got information from Outlook, from Google Sheets, from calendars, from emails, from voicemails to social media. There was no specific one place where we could reliably get closure information. So that's kind of where we started was, okay, what's happening in reality and where are people getting this information now? Then we had to take it to the next step of what should be happening. When I started discussing with the different divisions their needs, there was a lot of, well, on paper, this is what we do. Here's a solution that's already out there that we're all using. But when I checked that solution, there wasn't anything in there. So there was a disconnect between the reality of where closures were coming, like where the information was being handed versus where it was actually going. So we had to kind of regroup and, understand why the policies weren't followed, not admonishing anyone, say, hey, this is what you're supposed to do on paper, but what's preventing you from doing it? And that, I think, is really where close started to take shape from the start, in that we didn't want to just build a technology solution for the sake of doing so and then put it out there and have it collect dust. We wanted something that would be sustainable, that would last, and would be truly operational for what we need. So again, addressing the reality of the operations and, starting with what even is a closure? How long? What is the scope of a road closure? The prior attempts of systems that were implemented all had different definitions and criteria for what went in there. So we had to be clear as to, well, what's really happening? What's going on? What's the extent of a closure? Is it the entire road? Is it one direction? Is it a lane closure? What is a closure? And that discussion alone took several months with multiple folks in determining really what's the goal and importance of this. And, applying those business rules, because anything we do in terms of development, we have to have that scope. While reviewing the requirements as we started to build this out, I got with my colleague and, per our data governance program, we always want to make sure that our management team's on the same page. We don't want to implement something that's redundant or that could be leveraged with another project. And so close, I think, is the first example where we kind of stopped dead in our tracks, because as I was going over these requirements, they were very eerily similar to a parallel project that was happening in regards to steel plates. The same audience, the same goals, the same needs, same end users even. So it was one of those obvious choices where, hey, we need to combine these efforts because it's the same permit holder that's both closing the road and putting steel plates in the right of way. So we kind of had to redirect some of the requirements and redesign the data to account for that, but it's better in the end for that because we kept the end user in mind. We did look at third-party options. It was a lot of work to put this together. We're not a huge staff and we serve a lot of people. So we wanted to see, is there an option out there? And there are some brilliant options. There are some third-party systems that do even more than what our system does, but the same issues that we encountered and lessons learned from the staff after talking to them, we would still have those with a third-party system. Things like user logins and user management was a huge one, accessibility and required fields and things that made it difficult to use the systems that had already been tried. So we realized that a third-party system wouldn't necessarily fix that. It had to be procedural in addition to technical. So the close requirements, after months of interviews and really, again, assessing our current state and understanding where information was coming from, the biggest thing was to consolidate from multiple sources. This was a big thing in regards to schema and database design, because a closure, you can have a permit with one closure, you can have a permit with 5 closures. And then once we brought the steel plates in, that even made it more complex, because now we have a permit that could have 5 plates and 3 closures, or no plates and 7 closures. So how do you build that out sustainably and with a focus on quality and everything we needed it to do? So there's a lot in terms of the database design and the required fields and everything to go with it. We needed it to be flexible. Again, a wide variety of the entries that we were anticipating receiving. So wanted to make sure that we kept the design flexible so that people could participate and provide the information they need without being choked by things that they might not have and that would prevent them from participating. Needed to account for proactive and reactive closures. The original phone call that Drew received was because of an emergency. Well, one of them was an emergency closure because of flooding. So how do we get that looped into this process as well? We focused a lot on permits because that's in our department, but there are other external entities that close the road too. So how do we, again, account for that flexibility? Wanted to be accessible regardless of whether someone was on a laptop, a tablet, whether they were in the field, at home. Again, the prior lessons learned, we had a lot of folks say it was just difficult to access and difficult to log in, or things wouldn't work. So we wanted to make things as clean and simple as possible. So that device agnostic approach was really important to us because we wanted to get people involved. Be secure in services. And this was, again, with anything public facing, you always have elements of surprise. So we wanted to follow Esri best practices for, we ended up using Survey 123, which I'll get in a minute. But we wanted to use the best practices for securing that service so that we didn't have to worry about data being compromised. And finally, and most importantly, encourage participation and compliance. All of this work would not have gone anywhere if we hadn't kept that as a focus from the beginning. Needed that participation, we needed that information from folks, and we needed them to comply. And so that was always a goal and something in mind as we went through the database designs, marking which fields were required versus optional, the structure of the survey, everything with it had that participation and compliance in mind. So what is CLOSE? This next slide is a lot, very busy. I don't expect anyone to read it in detail, but I wanted to start with it because this is actually the list of applications and data sets that all comprise the CLOSE program. This is an entity relationship diagram. If you've never worked with one or made one, I highly encourage you to. It's extremely helpful in understanding the relationships between point A to point B, whether point A is a hosted feature layer or an experience builder application or an external API. So CLOSE overall is a series of web-based AGO applications. They leverage the same data set, which is our CLOSE production data set, which is a parent with 2 children. The children are plates and closures. And those 3 data sets are integrated throughout in different ways, depending on the end user and depending on how the user needs to see the data and when. This was a big deal for us too, because it institutionalized the knowledge, right? You build something in-house. If my lottery ticket's ever a winner, I want my colleagues to be able to pick up where I left off, right? So wanted to make sure that this information was known and understood so that when we have updates that are outside of our control or when we have hiccups, that people can always trace back to what is impacted downstream. The other thing that the entity to relationship diagram shows is the permissions and settings for each layer. When you get into a lot of ArcGIS Online stuff, you're dealing with multiple groups and, different settings of edit only versus modify versus view versus, there's a lot of different nuances. And so this diagram helped spell that out so we knew exactly what needed to go where and why. The other thing that you don't see on here are the actual item IDs for everything, which has helped me more than once when I'm like, which view am I looking at? I can grab this real quick and be like, okay, this is, have that context to go with it. So this is all the back end, but what is the actual front end and what are people using? The CLOSE application suite predominantly uses Survey 123 as its main home section. That's the survey that is facing out to our permit holders. There is a QR code on the back of every single permit that takes them to that survey, and that's where all the information intake is. We use Experience Builder for multiple different coordinator platforms. Predominantly, our CLOSE program coordinator runs that, and I'll kind of give a screenshot of that here shortly. And we also have Experience Builder for internal viewers. So our public service staff also interact with the data, but they don't need to edit the data. So we have a different view for them that uses EB so they can access it office and field. We also, as of last month, released the data citywide. So we also have a streamlined citywide viewer as well for folks who don't know how to work with the data directly, and that way they can still reference it. We also use Esri Quick Capture for internal use, and that's predominantly for audits and field inspections. That's been a big part of it from the beginning. We wanted sustainability of the program in mind. So any type of communication relief that we can provide to our field staff, we use field verification. We use Quick Capture to provide that field verification. And then finally, the only custom part of this, because everything is commercial off the shelf, the only custom part is our FME scripts. So if you're not familiar with the FME, stands for Feature Manipulation Engine. And it's a very powerful tool that we use kind of after the fact to bolster some of our partnerships. And I'll get into that for just here shortly. So the permit holder form, again, this is Survey 123, and it is public facing, but again, we don't just advertise the URL. It's on the back of every permit. And it is designed to be simple and straightforward for our users. We only made certain fields required, such as your name, your company, when you're putting the plate down. On the flip side, if you have a road closure with a detour and you're able to provide that detour, great. But if you don't have it, we don't want that to prevent you from submitting, right? So the form, again, every field has been discussed, I would say at least an hour by staff to understand exactly what we need to get down to and exactly what's most critical. The form also adapts based on the user's input. So on the right side, you can see, are you closing a lane of traffic? If this is a steel plate only entry, they would hit no and nothing below that would show up. So nice conditional logic. When they hit yes, they then have to say the type of closure. We had cases where if there is an incident or emergency, they might not have a permit number. But if they say construction, most definitely you need to provide us a permit number because you should have one. How many streets will be closed? So then that is also dynamic. So the number of child entries is dependent on how many streets they say they will close. And then they're able to provide, and you can see on the lower part here, where the location is, what is it, both directions, one direction, lane closures only, etc. And so they can put in multiple closures, and we have the same setup for plates as well, so that they can do that. And I do want to mention too, for this program, earlier I was mentioning what is a closure and how do you define that. The definition we went with was 1 hour or more of vehicular traffic and for at least one lane. So again, that gets complicated because you don't want a utility line locator whose truck is parked there for 15 minutes to have to worry about reporting something in. But you do need significant things, especially on arterial roads, if something's going to be blocked. So it became we decided the reasonable scope was 1 hour for at least one lane of vehicular traffic. For plates, we did something similar. The plates are every cluster of plates within one block in one direction. So to kind of explain what that means is if I am a vehicle driving down the road southbound, from that block, I will have one point that will represent the plates in that area. We did this because we didn't want folks to have to worry about shifting a plate 5 feet and then having to report it back to us, right? Like that's not practical. Again, we wanted compliance, we wanted participation, need to have folks motivated to do it. So by letting folks just do one point in one direction, it met our needs, such as snow plowing, where we want to know what direction of travel the plates are in, but it also kept things simple for the end user. Internally, everything feeds to some of the dashboards that I mentioned earlier. This is a screenshot of the closed program coordinator platform. Our coordinator basically is our data steward and manages the data day to day. So this is showing kind of the snapshot of active closures, and then you'll see active steel plates and active steel plate locations. So that's saying there are 123 locations, and in those locations are 240 total steel plates. And then there's quick links to everything there. Some of the tools that are used include editing and bulk editing. So when closures and plates do come in, they are verified. We don't just accept everything carte blanche. So this is one of the tools that's used. And I really like this screenshot because the box line that you can see there aligns perfectly with the World Traffic Service data that you can find in Esri's Living Atlas online. And so it's kind of cool to see the connection between those two. Another thing I want to point out here is the symbology was also very thought out and designed to reflect what was active versus what was upcoming and in the past. So on the Worthington Galena side of the road there, west of the active closure, you can see some lines that are a little bit more faded. And those are historic closures, which we typically filter out for most users, but our coordinator can see everything. So again, the internal viewer, this is a screenshot of the basic experience builder dashboard that my analyst built for our department to view everything. And this just gives them the snapshot. And that was the original ask of all of this, right? I want to see a map where I can see closures and who's responsible for them and how long they're going to be there. That's what you can see here. And when you click on a detail, like it'll give the breakdown of, in this case, this is a plate. So it's showing the permit number and what direction of traffic. You can see number of plates, when it's placed, when the proposed pickup is, which can change. And again, we communicate very much with our permit holders on things like that. Another big one for the plates was the 24-hour contact name and number. That's a big impact for our staff because when a plate gets knocked off at 2 a.m., it's awful to have an after-hour staff have to go out and figure out who the plate belongs to, make sure it's safe, make sure it's recorded. Now we have that information from the office. They don't have to leave anywhere. hey, this is who's responsible for the plate, we can get them on it much quicker. And our turnaround time has been so much faster as a result. So they're able to get all of the details there. Another part of the program, and again, wanting to be very keen on showing the impact of this from the start, we wanted to get the baseline metrics. That is the hardest when you're a year into something and you have no idea where you started, to show the growth that you've made. So we have a strong effort for auditing and field verifications. The screenshot you see here is our very simple quick capture app that allows our field right-of-way investigators to communicate back to our coordinator quickly. The quick capture app feeds the dashboard that I was showing earlier from the experience builder that I was showing earlier. And it has pictures and timestamps and everything. And they can then look and see, here's what we have on the map versus here's what I'm seeing in the field. And if there's some sort of disconnect, now we've got that all aligned in one place. So that's been a really powerful tool for us to just have that ongoing communication that's streamlined and consolidated in one place. The email notifications, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but this was an after the fact, after deployment, we started getting a lot of folks asking for this data. People wanted the information, and we weren't confident at first. This had been attempted before and didn't take off for the reasons I mentioned earlier. It's a challenging, slippery thing to grab onto. So the email notifications were kind of our way to keep interest in our partnerships, to keep folks engaged without having to just expose everything, because we didn't know what the data quality would be. We didn't know what our compliance rate was. Our first audit was a 48% permit compliant rate. That's not great. And so we didn't know what kind of impact close would have on that. So what you're seeing here is one of our email notification examples. This is run in Feature Manipulation Engine, FME, on a 3 times a day basis, where we look at the closures and we have a change detection table. So anything that they haven't been notified before of, they're notified on the email. And then there's the list, as you can see below, with active closures still. Fire department gets everything for obvious reasons, but we also have some areas such as Columbus City Schools and our downtown SID where they're receiving only certain closures that are filtered. So that was kind of the crash course of our development over, that was a period of 2 years where we went back and forth, redesigned the data, realigned the tools, and again, really just tried to get something robust and sustainable. Drew?
Okay, legislation and rollout. So Kim did a great job of highlighting how we got to this point. So on this particular slide, you can see how we started out with the executive support all the way through all the different vetting and the research, the business rules design, the testing, and all those types of things. But at the end of the day, how could we get this implemented? That's what gets to be really critical. And one of the things I would say is, in this particular space, when you bring leadership and the technology together and they harmonize, you can end up with a very good product. A lot of you probably have seen in different trade magazines and heard the old adage in this space that talks about people, processes, and technology. What we like to say here in public service is people, processes, and solutions. And those solutions may include technology as well. But in this particular case, we needed to make sure we can bind this together. So not only did we have to dedicate some staff, but we also had to get some legislation, get some teeth to this. How would we get folks to make sure that they were utilizing the closed application and to make sure that we were capturing the data that we actually needed? And we settled in on the fact that the only way they were going to do this, it was going to require a legislative code change. And we actually did that. Next slide, Kim. So on this particular rollout, Kim talked about the geospatial design, the operational process. And so what we needed to do was, again, we dedicated some staff, in which you're going to hear our close management analysts come up and speak about that. But we had to get that legislation. And that legislation basically said that on any time a road or a roadway or lanes are shut down in the city of Columbus, you are required to put this in the closed application. If you do not, we can actually give you a citation, and it is punishable by a fine. So When you think about the number of contractors that we deal with in the city of Columbus, just in our space, which is over 700, today those 700 contractors realize that they have to put this in close. And so close is woven into the everyday process. Not only that, we had to take it a step further. The branding of it, as you see with what Russ is wearing and what Kim is wearing and the different things we hand out and some of the other swag that Russ will talk about here in a second, that branding means something. So when people see it or they hear it, they know exactly what the expectations are and what it is that we're actually trying to do. And so, again, I really, really want to echo and stay on the point of when leadership and its people and the people we serve all are harmonized, we feel that's the best of a technology project that you can ever get. And so now I'm going to pass it on to our dedicated resource, Russell Bowerman.
Thanks, Drew. I really appreciate the introduction. Yeah, I'm just going to talk real quick about rollout, the when, who, and the how. And things were not all peaches and cream at first. So starting in 2023, the close requirements and information, including the QR code, were added on page 2 of all City of Columbus right-of-way permits. At this time, we made sure that our existing partners were aware of upcoming legislation changes and enforcement policies. We accomplished this through public right-of-way meetings, presentations at the Central Ohio Damage Prevention Council, other public events, and a lot of direct email correspondence with active stakeholders that were already in compliance. So we can kind of look at this first slide here, and we can see what a typical classroom situation would have been like, or a typical presentation. We would get up and talk about the signage that you have to have per code and standards, the City of Columbus specifications, how you have to pad around the steel plates, how you're supposed to be putting them down, clearances, things like that. Reporting, now that you're no longer supposed to report to the old phone number, you're supposed to report via close. And then, of course, we talked a lot about the role of the close program during those meetings. Next slide, please. So I guess I'll talk about what this slide is here before I get into the just reading the script. This was the typical slide that we had during our right-of-way quarterly meetings. We also use this slide in some of our training programs, and this basically throws it all out there. Hey, this is how you get to it. This is what it is, and this is the direction the city's going in. We are going to be mapping these closures and plates, and we would really like people to comply before we force it. And we did eventually get there. In June of 2023, we compiled and sent a mass email list to public relations. This list included over 700 stakeholder contacts as verified through existing permitting and maintenance of traffic systems. This allowed us to reach those who only dealt with right-of-way issues a few times a year and or had permits that were issued prior to the changes. So some of the companies thought they were grandfathered in essentially and didn't have to comply, which was not true. The public relations release was definitely a game changer for close. As you can imagine, the feedback we received as soon as enforcement was mentioned increased significantly, especially from those who were not interested in changing their processes. But the good news was listening to these complaints and questions was instrumental in creating further tips, standard responses, and attaining the required information. Because a lot of times we would get phone calls with incomplete information, not good addresses or not good information about the plates and closures. So some of the tips that we came up with, I'll just read my 3 favorites because I don't want to go through the whole correspondence list. We don't have time for that. But primary contact needs to be somebody that can be contacted regarding the entry being made, as opposed to 24-hour contact that's required when placing steel plates. Needs to lead to somebody who can respond to field emergencies such as damaged closures or knocked off steel plates. Another one that we got a lot was changes to previous submittals. They didn't want to have to fill out the form over and over again for minor changes such as time, or they were just moving a little bit further down the street. And so that's another tip that we always send out, is change to previous submittals. We have a change to previous submittals button on the form, and then the user does not have to re-enter all data on existing projects, which we like and they like. Another one that's along the same lines of the volume is the cluster of plates. You can, keep a cluster of plates within the same block face. We're not asking for individual steel plate pins. that would be a little excessive. And I could, if I had my boots on the ground at one time, and I would find that very annoying if I had to put down each individual steel plate. These kinds of informative tips, along with our operations improvements, led to program impacts over the next couple of years. Next slide, please, Kim. Okay, I don't like to just talk about the slides, but this one, I think it's best just to talk about the slide. Better understanding of right-of-way activity. So we tracked from cradle to grave 20 plates, basically, in 2021, where we knew what was going on with those plates at all times. And as you can see in 2025, quite a bit more than 20. So that kind of speaks for itself. Permit compliance, I mean, these numbers they really do speak for themselves. 48% to 93%, and that's from 2023 to 2025. We didn't really have any idea, 2021. Research time and customer service, that we could kind of quantify because we knew that when we received calls from the 311 system, which was called something different then, but regardless, 30 minutes to 10 minutes response time, and that's because we have access to the data so quickly. Increased transportation and safety, that's a little hard to quantify, but we did track beginning to end closures over 1,000 in 2025. Next slide, please. Operational impact. Well, we don't know what operational impact we're having. Obviously, we have to do some audits for that. So we began performing quarterly audits using Survey 123 and Quick Capture in January of 2023. That process was great from day one. I know Kim talked a little bit about those programs earlier. The apps allowed a few investigators to obtain real-time data for over 20 sites per day without much trouble at all. The results themselves were disappointing at first. We've been fully working with public and private stakeholders since October of 2022. Based on the existing steel plate list, I had hoped that we were about 80% compliance. That was certainly not the case. We only had about 63% of the plates and less than half the closures. So yeah, the lesson learned, especially for me, was that the audits were going to be more important than inspected. Since then, our outreach was enhanced, partly as previously discussed. Let me go back to that. I'll read a little bit of that real quick, we did Farm and Science Review. We did a couple events at the Expo Center. We did 311 days. We did the contractors days at the zoo. And then, of course, along with the multiple meetings with the Damage Prevention Council. So there's a little more detail on that about how we reached out. Where are we at here? Oh, so, yeah, since then, our outreach was enhanced, of course. In 2025, our team was captured auditable data for 189 plate locations, 139 closure locations, and over 300 sites altogether. So our increased compliance and data sets had a lot more impacts than we planned. Next slide, please, Kim. I am reading from a script, so I'm trying to slow down. Might be a runaway train. Thanks, Kim. I appreciate it. 311 investigations and impacts. Close now has its own section and subject identification within the City of Columbus 311 system. The program successfully concluded 17 cases since May of 2025. This does not include the more than 100 cases that we were involved in that were closed by the right-of-way permit office. Some examples of this are resetting steel plates by private companies and contractors instead of the City of Columbus crews having to do them. Because we were able to just get on the phone and call them right away, our crews didn't have to go out and do it. They would just call me back or answer the phone and say, we're headed out there right away. And then I don't have to call a different department, and it's not on the city's dime. Answering closure questions from local businesses and community leaders. We get a lot of event leaders that will call us and check on things, and we can tell them, hey, this, on your bicycle route or on, whatever it is, your running route, there's going to be construction in this area, and then they can schedule their mapping. They can map around that and coordinate around that. Sending plate complaints. So if a plate is knocked or loose, or we get a lot of noise complaints, which sometimes we can't do much about because if they're safe, and plates are going to make a little bit of noise. But yes, answering those questions from local business community leaders and sending the plate complaints to the proper city resources so we can send it straight to public utilities or send those complaints straight to design and construction if it's part of a big CIP project, and that they can deal with the people with their budgets and with their projects. And then, of course, along with the 311 calls, some of those eventually make it to claims. The close program has become increasingly useful to the Public Service Claims Department over the last few years. Interaction with this section has almost doubled every year since the beginning of the program. That's in 2022. Close is specifically useful in verifying the plate owners or contractors during flat tire and other non-police involved incidents. This often allows the claims to be quickly assigned to the proper department, section, or project manager. While 311 and claims have greatly benefited from the program, and I deal with them more day to day, which is why I wanted to talk about those. They're certainly not our only partners interacting with Close daily. We now have apps and notifications going out to several key stakeholders. I know Kim talked about a couple earlier. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kim to discuss some more internal and external partnerships in more detail. Thanks.
Thanks, Russ. The partnerships we've gained from this program have been phenomenal, because once you can provide this type of reliable information, people want to know about it. It's important. Internally to public service, we now send notifications to our traffic management control center. They have access to the dashboard, but sometimes people don't want to go look up a dashboard. They just want to be told what's happening and when. So those notifications continue to be key. Our right-of-way permitting group, Russ just went over the huge impact that this has had on right-of-way operations overall. And snow and ice control, I think we could talk about this one alone for a while. We did a pilot last year to feed the plate data directly into the in-cab solution of the drivers. And so now, instead of receiving an Excel list with previously 20 to 40 plates on it, they're seeing the data real time as they're driving, where those plate clusters are, and even the direction that they're heading. And that's huge for them. It's a massive safety improvement from before. We've also been able to partner with a lot of external groups. Russ mentioned the Central Ohio Damage Prevention Council. They've been a phenomenal partner in helping us get the word out for this. Public safety has been really engaged with us, and I'll go into a little bit more on what we're doing with them here shortly. Safer Downtown, they're formerly the Downtown SID. They were our original pilot with the email notifications, and I'll show that here in just a moment, as well as Columbus City Schools. Recent developments that we have, trying to get the slide here. There we go. Recent developments. So basically, since we won ESIG, and in the last 6 months or so, we established our partnership with 911 dispatching. We've rolled out our data citywide. So again, wanting to be confident in the quality of our data, we didn't want to just expose it for everyone to see, but we've gotten a view now that we feel very comfortable sharing with our partners throughout the city. We reinvigorated our connected city relationship with Waze and Google. So now more major closures, we don't have a direct API to feed it yet. That's on the long-term plan. But we are able to provide that information authoritatively with more granularity than can be crowd reported, right? We know when the actual end date is, or we know it is a project, and we know the details of the closure rather than something that's crowdsourced. So that's been an improvement as well. And this is where I'm going to give just applying for the ESIG, really encourage you guys to do it, because we got so much permit holder feedback from folks. We asked questions that I don't know that we would have thought to ask if it were not for the ESIG application. And a lot of it was really great, and we were really appreciative of the positive impacts we got. But we also received some critiques and suggestions, and we're taking those seriously. So there's some upcoming projects we have that are based on that as we continue to improve the program. So the real world notifications, here's an example. The boundary that you see here is the Columbus Downtown SID, formerly the Downtown SID. They are now called Safer Downtown. And they're just an organization that helps coordinate with day-to-day operations, logistics, traffic issues and festivals and sidewalk issues, that kind of stuff. They help their residents and businesses come together. And they happen to just have some good timing, and we ended up partnering with them at the start on sending email notifications for closures. So I actually pulled one yesterday. This was the screenshot as of yesterday, the closures involved. And so when this one came in, an email came at around 9:15 in the morning once that was approved to show that Long Street closure for an event happening on the 19th. So now we've approved it, we've vetted it, it's sent immediately, well, within a day to our partners, and then our partners can communicate. So Safer Downtown can reach out to those businesses and say, hey, there's going to be a 4-hour closure that shuts down Long Street on the 19th. So be prepared, make arrangements, etc. They've been really great in providing that support and feedback as to what's important. And again, all the previous alerts are still listed on there as well. The cool thing about these notifications too is that they're dynamic. So when the underlying data changes, such as our school zones, the notifications will change too. Operational partnerships. So again, we worked with the 911 dispatching center, and they've been a great partner to help us capture those emergency closures that we otherwise might not know about. If there's a closure at 2 a.m. on a Saturday because of an unexpected crash, it may be cleaned up and gone by the time Russ is in Monday morning to look over things. So they've been a really great partner, and we built them a power user access to be able to streamline, make it easy on their operations. The last thing we want to do is make it cumbersome. So it is the bare minimum of what they need to say, hey, here's the closure, here's our expected time where it's going to last. And they, unlike others, have the ability to edit because they're power users and they're authoritative sources for closing the road. Upcoming efforts, we want to increase our auto notification audience. That's been really successful, and people like the consolidated information just being delivered straight to their inbox. We want to implement better conflict detection efforts. So conflict detection is something that's naturally occurred when we see a closure and a planned closure start to conflict. Our right-of-way permit team may see that, but we want to look to automate that and leverage that information more for expanding for other use cases. We're doing an analysis this year on what it would look like to implement lane closure fees, right? If you think about our right-of-way, it's a resource, it's a utility. And when somebody shuts down a lane, they are taking away that utility from the public. So now we have several years of data to see what would happen, what would the impact be if we were to implement a lane closure fee on arterials or on lanes or on full closures. And so we can look at the reasonability of that. And then we're going to expand the scope. We started with just vehicular traffic for closures because we wanted to keep it simple. Since we hit a record-breaking 93% in our last audit, which was just wonderful to see, we feel like we're at a maturity level where we can expand to sidewalk closures and bikeway closures and parking lanes that are then, taken out of service. So there's a lot where we can explore and leverage this data, and we plan to continue doing just that. Drew?
So to kind of bring this full circle, we started out by talking about the fact that we needed to measure something that was at the request of our director. So we went about measuring and collecting data. Then we got to the management portion. That's what we talked about when we identified a dedicated coordinator in Russ Bowerman, as well as changing legislative code within the city. That's the management portion of it that needed to be in place to make this work. And now coming full circle, we're going to make it better. And how we're going to make it better? First of all, we're going to be practical and realistic. Things like ITIL practices to assess current state. Those types of things are very critical, as Kim talked about, in terms of getting those kind of certifications within our staff. We're constantly training as well. And then we took to heart what failed in practice versus process. What is realistic? What is the real deal boots on the ground? Tied back to true operational need. We have these different operational needs. What you'll find with these types of evolution of projects is that you're bringing various pieces, parts, and components together of our operations, of our people, of our traveling public, of our contractors, and we're bringing all of them to the watering hole so we can actually have the right conversation, identify the right solutions, and then implement in a very, very practical way. And then we want to make sure that we're pragmatic in our approach, prioritize our compliance and participation first. These are all some things that are takeaways in terms of trying to make these things work, in terms of being practical and realistic. And at the end of the day, to complete the circle, we want to make it better. And that's what we think that we've actually done in all the different things that we talked about here. So again, want to thank you. I know Kim's going to thank you too, but I can't thank you enough for the work that's been done. And also to my team, Kim, you are a rock star. I tell people all the time, technology projects, as you've heard, technology projects, they're as good as the people that you have making them work. And at the end of the day, we're going to make somebody's life better. So thank you all. We thank all of you for allowing us to participate, for the award. You ought to see what it's done to our folks in terms of bringing us closer here in the Department of Public Service. And we did this in-house. So thank you. Kim?
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better, Drew. Thank you all, and thank you, GPN, for this opportunity.
Wowzers, thank you. City of Columbus. I hope that all the participants watching today can, number one, clap for, show some love for the City of Columbus. All of you, Russ, Drew, Kim, thank you. I hope you can see the depth and the care of this close project. These are wicked, smart, geo-nerd, technical wizards that are sharing their work with all of us, which is really at the heart of what GPN is about. So with that, I think I don't see any Q&A questions that have been submitted. We have a few minutes, and if no one else has any, I think I may have just a couple of quick ones to help advocate for why we're on this call in the first place. What advice, City of Columbus, would you give other organizations in terms of whether or not to apply for an eSig award?
Oh, I'll take this one, Drew, if you don't mind. I loved the process. Even if it hadn't been us, I am really thankful we did it, because the questions, it is a very comprehensive packet. I mean, it makes you reflect from start to finish on everything. And because this was such a long, I mean, from the beginning of when Drew received that phone call to roll out was over 2 years. So and that was just development. And then we still had work with legislation and everything else. So, advice I would give is start, just do it. Just grab the list of questions and start comparing to your project where you fall on those things, because you're going to discover things you might not have otherwise thought about. It's going to encourage you to look at more ROI metrics. I feel like that's something we are always struggling with as GIS professionals, is we know everyone's gut tells you it's better, but how do you actually know it's better? And that measure and manage is so important in order to make it better. So I would encourage folks to take notes, keep hold of things, set your benchmarks, and go for it, for sure.
Yes, thank you, Kim, and obviously Drew and Russ and your whole team. What have you done to celebrate?
What have we done to celebrate, Drew?
We've basically been going around for the last few months evangelizing this. Our director who prompted this, she moved on to another job, and just to see the look on her face when she found out that we won. Our executive staff here, the mayor's office, Department of Technology. So we've done a lot of that in terms of, and then plus Kim hasn't relinquished the award yet to put it into the executive office. She's still holding it. And so, but anyway, I'm sure this spring we're going to probably do something, but we have talked about it in our annual breakfast that we had and sharing that. And so a lot of sharing and a lot of high-fiving folks for doing the tough work.
Yeah, you all need to celebrate. Go to a nice brunch together. There is a question here from Tim Nolan. Hi, Tim. Was it hard to get buy-in from council and city management and department heads to update these processes?
Drew, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can start out. It wasn't because of how we showed the value. Once we were able to articulate the value, and that's where Kim was talking about being practical, and they could actually visualize it. Sometimes, as you put it, Rachel, sometimes we can get so far into what we do that we don't articulate well what the benefits are going to be. And we were able to identify those benefits right back to the public, to the people that we serve, but also the contracting community. Things got even better for them. And then also to our 311 folks, the fact that we could actually triage and be able to research and find out what problems were going on from 30 minutes down to 10 minutes. All those are practical things that people got benefit. So that part wasn't hard at all. What was a little bit dicey was some of the advocacy groups that thought we were doing something that we weren't doing in terms of impacting homelessness and things like that. But those are the things that come when you go to council. But in terms of our council and our leadership, once we articulated the things that were benefits, they saw the true value in it and jumped on board.
And we didn't just articulate those things. Part of, and I didn't get into the details of development, but was a prototype to show what that would look like so that they could see early on, this is what we're going for, and this is what tools you will have if you let us do this. Because again, when you're asking for a map with closures, but you really want the permits, you want the details, you want the owners of those closures, that's more than just a map of closures. And so we wanted to show, hey, this is how we get here so that those return on investments could be recognized.
And Kim, may I add too, is that some of our internal folks, because we had to rely like on our Department of Design and Construction. So some of our construction folks were a little bit apprehensive because they felt like we were going to be giving some additional work to the contractors that have to do something. And even some contractors were asking for plan notes in terms of being able to charge us to put it in the system. And so that's where the leadership piece comes in, where we basically said, no, this is what you're going to do. And then after the fact, once they started seeing some of the benefits and things like that, our construction folks bought in, and to the point now where it's part of our culture.
What was great too on that note was that the feedback we received when we solicited feedback in putting the ESIG application together is that multiple people said, this is easier than calling it in. This is easier than putting it in a Google Sheet. They were actually happy about the form and the accessibility of it and all of the things that we intended to have as a benefit for them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Russ, Drew, Kim, City of Columbus, all of your leadership. Thanks for sharing this with the larger community, not just your city or your state, but the entire nation. And actually, GPN is an international organization. So whether you're watching this live or you're coming back and watching this through our Learning Annex, it's going to be great. I put a link to the ESIG Awards page. There's two systems that you can apply for. The main thing to note is that the 2026 awards are due at the end of day of June 1st, 2026. And we have an entire suite of application submission details, flowcharts, past award winners, application packets, and even a story map and awards history. And so City of Columbus, you are part of this 40 plus year legacy of like the Oscar Awards of geospatial excellence. So we are so happy for you. All of the applicants need to think about your own work as you lean into 2026 and be inspired by the City of Columbus and use the resources that GPN is providing to you to think ahead towards June 1st. Allow yourself plenty of time because this is a pretty rigorous set of application requirements. And you can see from Columbus's presentation today that it took them a long time, years. This isn't just one and done. This is very inspiring. So I think unless there are further questions, we want to wrap up on time. Oh, are there any further? Nope, I don't think so. Danielle, can we lead ahead to the closing of the GPN into 2026? You're all the best. It was so fun to meet Kim and her family last October in Denver. Very inspiring. So the reason we're GPN participants, members, is that this is why we do what we do. So upcoming, please mark your calendar for the continuation of this series. We'll be celebrating in February, March, and April with the other 2025 Exemplary Systems and Geospatial Award winners, Plano, Texas, King County, Washington, and Midland, Texas. So put it on. And then, of course, Cal GIS, that is literally days away, isn't it? Okay. And the Location Enterprise Addressing Conference coming up virtually, the GIS ValTech Conference, and ongoing GIS Leadership Academies. All of these resources are available on Geospatial Professional Network website. And we don't just have a Leadership Academy anymore. We now have an Advanced Leadership Academy. Many locations and options for you to choose from. So please check out our website, and additionally our new learning annex, where many of these webinars and resources and slide decks and all of these things are available. This is one of the benefits of being a Geospatial Professional Network member. And next fall in Milwaukee, we will celebrate the 2026 Exemplary Systems and Geospatial Award winners, just as we did last fall with Kim and her family in Denver. So I think that may be all. We're wrapping up. Thank you especially to Drew, Kim, Russ, and also to the GPN staff, especially to Danielle and Wendy. Thank you all. Happy New Year, and we'll see you in February. Bye-bye.